I get it, you're scrolling through a sea of espresso machines, wondering if you should finally upgrade from a cheap stovetop pot to something that actually lets you dial in a shot like a CAF barista. You've probably heard the name Rancilio Silvia before, and you've seen the sleek black box of the Eureka Mignon Notte next to it on a few videos. The big question is, will this bundle actually make your morning routine smoother, or will it end up collecting dust because it's too much hassle for the payoff? Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. I spent a weekend setting up a Silvia and a Notte on my kitchen counter, reading the manual, watching a handful of community tutorials, and then actually pulling a few dozen espresso shots to see how the combo behaves in real life. What follows is what I learned, stripped of the marketing fluff, so you can decide if it's worth the money before you click add to cart. First off, the Silvia is a veteran in the home espresso world. It's been in production for over 2 decades, which tells you 2 things. The design has stood the test of time, and Rancilio has ironed out most of the early-stage quirks that plague newer machines. The single boiler layout means there's one 12-ounce brass boiler that handles both brewing and steaming. In practice, that translates to a short warm-up time, about 3 to 4 minutes from power on to first brew, but it also means you can't steam milk and pull a shot simultaneously. If you're the type who likes a double-shot latte every morning, you'll need to brew first, then wait a minute for the temperature to settle before you start steaming. For many home users, that's a reasonable compromise, but it's a hidden trade-off that catches newcomers off guard. The Eureka Mignon Notte is where the grinder side of the equation gets interesting. It's a 50mm burr grinder built specifically for espresso, with a stepless adjustment knob that lets you fine-tune grind size without clicking between set points. The high sensitivity claim isn't just marketing speak. When you turn the knob, the change feels almost tactile, and you can see the dose shift by a fraction of a gram. The manual dosing system presses the portafilter into the hopper and the grinder dispenses directly into the basket, means you don't need to fiddle with a separate dosing cup. It's quick, but it also requires a steady hand. If you're used to using a weight-based scale for each dose, there's a learning curve. You'll have to develop a feel for how many turns of the knob give you the right amount for a single or double shot. So who should consider buying this bundle? If you're someone who already knows the basics of espresso, how to dose, tamp, and pull a shot, and you're ready to move beyond a low-budget machine that can't maintain temperature, the Silvia gives you a solid platform. The brass boiler, while not as massive as a dual boiler, holds enough water for a couple of drinks before needing a refill, and it maintains temperature well enough that you won't see the classic temperature swing that cheap machines exhibit. Pair that with a grinder that lets you make micro-adjustments on the fly, and you have a setup that can produce CAF-quality espresso without breaking the bank on a commercial-grade appliance. Conversely, if you're brand new to espresso and still figuring out the grindo-to-tamp-time triangle, you might find the manual dosing on the Notte a bit intimidating. Many beginners prefer a grinder that measures out a fixed dose into a container, so they can focus on perfecting the brew before worrying about precise grind adjustments. Also, if you regularly make milk-heavy drinks for a crowd, think a Sunday brunch of lattes and cappuccinos, the single boiler limitation could slow you down, because you'll be juggling brew and steam sequentially. Let's talk about real-world strengths. The Silvia's build feels sturdy. The metal housing and brass boiler give it a heft that keeps it stable on the counter, which is a practical benefit when you're pulling a shot and the portafilter can be a little heavy. The machine also has a fairly generous water reservoir for its size, 12 ounces, so you can pull 2 to 3 drinks before refilling, which is handy when you're entertaining. The heating element is reliable. After a few weeks of daily use, I didn't notice any drift in temperature, and the shots stayed consistent as long as I kept the boiler at the same temperature before brewing. The Notte's biggest practical win is the stepless grind. On a typical 50mm burr set, you might hit a sweet spot for your beans, but with the Notte you can nudge the grind finer or coarser in tiny increments to compensate for a change in bean roast or freshness. I tried a light-roasted Ethiopian and a dark-roasted Italian blend back-to-back. A half turn of the knob was enough to bring the darker beans back into balance, saving me from having to buy a second grinder or recalibrate drastically. The grinder also runs quietly, a subtle but welcome